So today, what are we talking about? Well, like how on Passion Radio I am called DJ LP. Well, out on road, I am Laura D. Pusey, death care practitioner, and I talk about all things that are related to dying, death, and grief. That is my work. I also practice as well, so I'm not just a talker. Yeah, I'm out there and I'm doing the work. So if you have somebody who is at or approaching their end of life experience, that's where I come in. If you need to arrange a funeral, that's where I come in. I also conduct funerals and I also help with grief, bereavement, and the mourning period, which I explained last week. I defined them and went into detail, but maybe not so much though about the whole grief side of things. So today, let's talk about grief, baby. Oh, yes. But the thing is, when we're talking about it, we're going to be coming from my perspective, from our perspective, okay? So not necessarily the textbook grief that we have come to know and let's say adopt, because it's not necessarily a one size fits all dynamic. Yeah, there are in my book, Tapestries of Grief, 17 different types of grief defined. And in truth, I go on to talk about a lot more different types of grief. So let's get into it. Okay, so for today's show, I was thinking to myself, what am I going to talk about today? What is it going to be? And I remembered that there was a phrase when I was younger. People used to say, oh, look at him or look at her. He doesn't know he's born. And I think they often say that of kids, like, look at them. They're so happy. They don't even know, or I don't know, so miserable. I traced back that line, that comment, and it turns out that that was taken from the book, The Great Gatsby. I looked it up just to see, like, where does that come from? Because everything we say comes from somewhere. Everything originates from someplace, whether we know it or not. And we just kind of pick up stuff as we go along, and it becomes part of our language. It becomes part of our actions and our days. And sometimes we don't really stop to think about what we're saying and where it's coming from. So I think the reason why I was kind of jolted back to that memory is because sometimes we don't even realize that we're alive. Look at him. He doesn't know he's alive, him. And the actual line that was taken from The Great Gatsby was, he's so dumb, he doesn't even know he's alive. And I suppose, yeah, maybe you could say that about some people. But I think that it's just easy to kind of fall into this routine of being alive, waking up in the morning, going to work, coming home, sorting out the house and the family, going to sleep, and then waking up and doing it all over again. And before we know it, where time has gone. And I think practically every week I talk about Benjamin Franklin, not because I like him, not at all. But there's one comment that he said that always sticks in my head, that we die, many of us die at 25 and are not buried until we are 75. That is deep. It means something. Maybe we are missing a trick. Maybe we are missing life. What does being alive mean to you? How does it feel to be alive? Have you ever wondered, like, what does it actually mean? What does my life mean? Does it even matter that you are alive right now? There are so many people in the world who are upset with their life. They are miserable with life. I'm one of them. I'll put my hand up and I'll say it. I admit, you know, and I notice a lot in my work that it matters to others when we are no longer alive. When we die, everybody else feels it. When somebody you love dies, you feel it. So what does it mean to be alive? And I think that maybe sometimes we're missing that part of life, the fact that we have to really just stop and think about what we're doing, who we are, and what this is. What is the end game? What's the end result? Like, between you and me, I often wonder, like, what's the point? What is the point to all of this? What is the significance of my life? What is the bigger picture? And what am I living for? I decided in my teens, I think my late teens, that life was a complete joke and life was painful. And so, at least on one occasion, I decided that's it, I've had enough. I'm going to end it. And although that attempt landed me in hospital because I wasn't able to complete my will at that time, I'm still here to tell the tale. So there must be a reason for life. And every day that we have either takes us closer to or further away from our purpose. And, you know, I speak candidly about my life and my ups and downs because my life is not unique. Many of us have highs and lows. And at the end of the day, they're not really different to anybody else's. I guess the difference is how we receive those highs and lows, how we bounce back, what we learn from our experiences, and where we go next. I think that's it. I think that's what matters. You know, we're here. This is an experience. We're here to have experiences. And so I can't help but come back to my book, Tapestries of Grief. And it's kind of that really that I want to talk to you about today. And I'm going to just present some notions about grief to you that I think will help you. Whether you are listening to this on Passion Radio, whether you are watching the playback on Facebook or on YouTube, whenever you hear this video, it may be in 4 or 5 years' time from me actually sitting down to record this and to speak over these airwaves, it will still stand. The thing about my work is that even though we may feel that we are bound to time, it's actually timeless. It's actually timeless. So, without further ado, as they say, what I'm going to do is just talk about grief, talk about the effects that it has on our lives, and yeah, the different ways that we can navigate or recognize the effect that grief has on us. I spoke to a friend of mine this weekend who has been working with a family. One of our darling sisters has lost her husband, and in their community, because not every Black community is the same, in their community they are scared of death. They rejoice about life. They don't deal with death at all. They just do not entertain notions of it. So their friend had died and his wife is in pain. And they were saying, well, how do we deal with this? What do we actually do? How do we support her? What are we supposed to say? What's going on with her? Why is she still talking about him as if he was alive? It's grief. It's grief. So let's get into it. Okay, so there was this woman, right? And her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she was working with people who were dying. They were in the active stages of dying. So the active stage means that, yes, okay, we're all going to die one day. But if you're actively dying, then it is imminent, like it's on its way. We are dying within the next week or two. Anyway, Elizabeth came up with 5 stages of grief that were experienced by dying people. And those stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And those stages of grief became the template that is used to define the experience of grief for everybody. Healing models were created off the back of this template, and to this day, they are undisputed in society. I don't dispute them. I quite welcome them. I mean, who am I to say what's right or wrong for whole communities, families, nations, or individuals? But I just made up my own because I can. And that's that. So I'm introducing you now to the grief wheel. And those on radio, those listening online won't be able to see the images that I have up in front of me. But if you friend request me on Facebook, my name is L-E-L-L-E, DJ LP Pusey, Pusey, then you'll be able to be my friend. And the bonus is that you'll be able to see the slideshow. Alternatively, you can go onto YouTube, look up the channel Dippism or Laura D. Pusey, and you will find this presentation there. Okay, not right now, like give me a chance to edit it. Okay, but it will probably be on this evening. Okay, so what I've got in front of me is the grief wheel, and the word you is at the center, because you are always at the center of your grief. And within your grief, you will find that there's trauma, anguish, exasperation. There is a time of haggling and deep sorrow before we experience that spark, that click, readjustment, and then we move forward. So let's talk about trauma. We often start this great grief wheel with trauma. It starts somewhere. Every experience that we have had starts somewhere. A bit like that saying, you know, he doesn't know he's alive. He don't know he's born. We experience many traumas in our lives. Some we bounce back from quite easily, and others knock us for six or right off our feet. Trauma can be sustained over a long period of time. Yeah, so you can have experiences with people or a chain of experiences that happen that just cause you trauma after trauma after trauma. We will talk about that in the coming weeks. But sometimes our experiences of trauma come quite suddenly, and they are quite unexpected. And so we can never be prepared for the shock of news that perhaps our loved one has died. And so at that time, our bodies can tend to do their own thing as our brains struggle to take in the information. At first, we may deny or rebuke the news. It's not true. It's not happening. This is a sick joke. I'm not having it. You're lying. Other times we could just, I don't know, buckle. That's often why they say, are you sitting down? Sit down, I've got some news to tell you. Because quite literally, it's like the rug can be pulled from beneath us. Let's go on to anguish. When you experience a loss, you encounter pain. And it really can be a very heartbreaking experience. Anguish is another word for torment. And you can find yourself feeling as though you are in agony, literally, because of your pain and your distress. So you may just shut down as you deal with your confusion. It's not uncommon to lose your appetite, to experience insomnia, migraines, heart palpitations, or a flare-up of an existing illness that you might already suffer from. You know, this is real. Anguish is real. And oftentimes we're not really aware of these things until they literally hit us where it hurts. You can also find yourself feeling quite exasperated. Okay, so as time goes on, you can find that you're just vexed. You just vex up. You're just angry. You're just, frustrated. You're just anxious and just, and that can lead you to have impatient outbursts. Maybe you flare up against others because nobody understands what's going on inside your head. It's just, everything is getting on top of your nerves. And sometimes our frustration and our anger can get the better of us. Normal, natural, real. This is life. Okay. Otherwise, mild irritations can fill you with rage. And sometimes it's better off if people just leave you to it. Okay. Sometimes you just need your space. Nobody will ever really know what's going on inside your head. So sometimes you just need to be alone with yourself to figure it out. You may be feeling guilty. You may feel shame. You may feel fear. And it's quite legit. When your life is put together, you don't often realize that you're building it with other people as well. But it just takes one thing to bring the whole house down. And you can be left thinking, what is this? What next? Oftentimes as well, our griefs, our deaths, our experiences don't just happen like one-y. Sometimes you will experience 3 deaths or more than 3 all at once. That will lead to cumulative grief, and we'll discuss that another day. But what I'm saying is that, when it rains, it pours. It's not often just a shower, it's the whole blasted lot. Okay, so we might find ourselves feeling regret. We're filled with those, but if only I had said this, if only I had done that, if only I had thought of that. What if I had said that? What if I had done that? What if I had thought of that? Why didn't I say that? Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I think of that? Ultimately, you want your loved one back, and you will find yourself reflecting. It's natural. You will have to go back over the years or the time that you've spent with your loved one. Sometimes you may wish that things had played out differently. Maybe that last conversation, or those signs that may have been missed, certain behaviors maybe that might have irritated you. And when you look back, it's like, do you know what? I would die if I could just hear your snoring again. I don't know. The snoring doesn't really do much for me if somebody else is doing it. But, there are these things, that people do as they live their lives. And when they are no longer with us, we can yearn to hear or see those characteristics again. It's a weird something, So we find ourselves experiencing deep sorrow. And our sorrow stems from the fact that we will never again experience our loved ones in their physical state. Their ways, their little idiosyncrasies. I don't know whether that's the word, but it feels like it fits. So we're going to go with it. Their little ways, their little sayings, their beliefs, their behaviors, their understandings of life, their ways of reasoning. And so when they have gone, it's like our emotions know no bounds. And we can find ourselves sinking into a depression. It's easy to believe that we may never experience happiness or deep inner joy ever again. And life might just feel hopeless, without our loved one. Now, there's also a flip side, and I'm going to talk about it now, because not everybody is nice. Not everybody who walks the earth is a nice person. And I know that there's a saying that you should never speak ill of the dead, but some people are just downright wicked. And so sometimes we can actually feel relief when somebody passes away. We may find ourselves feeling an inner freedom that we've never been able to experience before. And if that person was loved by others, we can feel quite isolated because we may not be able to share our true feelings with others. But when it comes to grief and mourning, as I explained last week, we spoke about mourning and grief and bereavement. And I explained that mourning is the period of time during which signs of grief are made visible. And I explained that, you know, back in the day, people would wear black and you would know that somebody is mourning. Nowadays, it's not as easy to see because we wear different colors, we live our lives, and a lot of people just wear black as standard and they're very happy with themselves. Life is very fine for them. But yeah, traditionally, typically the mourning period is when people know that you're mourning and, you know, life is not good for you. You're not in a good place. You're grieving the loss of somebody that you have known or loved. And there comes a time when we are, after a while, more able to face a new way of living without our loved one. But what we need to recognize is that this takes time. It's not an overnight thing. You don't just snap out of it. It don't go like that. It would be nice. It would be very nice if it did. But it doesn't, because we are here on earth having a human experience. We are here to feel and to learn. And we learn more about ourselves through our experiences, our experience of the world, our experience of the people in it, and our experiences of ourselves. So when we've had a grief, when we've lost somebody that we care about, we have to take that time. We really have to respect that time and allow ourselves that time. After a while, though, we may find that we're able to sort out our loved ones' personal items. We may feel that we're ready and able to go back to work or socialize or plan for the future. It takes time, though. As I've said, we don't just bounce back. And grief is a thing that will come and go in waves with different emotions every time. You may find yourself laughing at one point, and you may find yourself in floods of tears the next. But the time does come where we move forward, and looking to the future, we can start to forge maybe new relationships or change the dynamic of older relationships with our loved ones who remain. We have a new meaning of life, and we start to take each day as it comes, as opposed to when we're grieving, doing it minute by minute, or second by second, or hour by hour. Instead of inching our way forward, we can start to stand up again and say, okay, let's take it this day. Let's take this week. We'll take it this month. Okay, this year. And we can start to plan ahead and think about what our life might look like now. We can find ourselves building new experiences and happier times because life kind of takes over. It continues. People's lives continue, and you just kind of get rushed along with it as you get back into the swing of things. But it doesn't mean, though, that we just forget those that we've lost. We take them with us. We move forward together, you know, and that is the beauty of life, of death, and of grief. You know, when you look back on all the stages that we've discussed through the grief wheel, the trauma, anguish, exasperation, haggling, sorrow, readjustment, and moving forward. It's like a path that is guiding us. It's like a natural order that our bodies take. And it looks different for everybody. And it's not always experienced in the same order. And you may feel, okay, I've had this trauma. Let me just readjust right now and get over it. Those are steps, though, that you've missed out, such as the anguish that you're trying to suppress, the exasperation that you're trying to express because you don't want to cuss everybody out, that feeling of haggling, like if only. You will probably have that because that's more kind of in your head. That deep sorrow might be something that you wish to avoid. The thing is, though, you can't just jump to readjust, because if you have had somebody in your life that you have known, that you have loved, that you have cared deeply about, that you think of, you know, that really means something to you, then at some point you're going to have these other experiences. Life is going to catch up with you. Sometimes we go to work too soon after a loss. Sometimes we do so because we think, well, you know what, I just need to take my mind off things. Or perhaps I'm letting the show down at work. They need me. If I don't do the paperwork, who's going to do it? If I don't sort this out, who's going to do it? Let me tell you something, right? When it comes to work, if you had been the person who passed away, they would be finding somebody to replace you. Somebody else would be sitting at your seat within a matter of days. They would go through the whole interview process, and before the time comes, before they know it, before anyone knows it, they've got their own mug and they're sitting at your desk and they're stretching out quite nicely. What matters, I suppose, what I'm saying is that you need to take time for yourself. You are at the center of your grief. You may want to put your children there, or your parents, or your siblings, or whoever else is also feeling the pain. And that may be in context. You know, if it's maybe an in-law that has passed away, you know, or a step person, or somebody like that, you may not be the center mourner, but it doesn't mean that you don't have grief too. Okay? So it doesn't matter who has passed away. You've experienced a loss. And if you're feeling it, then you need to take time with yourself and be gentle. I know that there is a tendency for people to say, well, you know, it wasn't mine. And well, look how they're feeling over there. They've lost more than me. But we each have relationships with others that are personal to ourselves. A mother can have 2 children, 5, 8 children, and her relationship with each of them will be different. That's life. And so when she passes away, the experiences of those that are left are going to be felt uniquely, individually by each person. Sure, there's often a common ground. She's mum. Yeah, there's always a common ground, often when somebody passes away. But that common ground is not a unique experience for all. As we are individuals on this life journey, we will all have our own experiences, and they are all to be honored. Okay? That's the way it's set. That's the way it is. Maybe it's one of those laws of the universe that we're here to have a human experience. So, I think at that point, I'm just going to say, I'm going to plug myself as a grief and bereavement coach and mentor. If you want to talk more about your grief, then you can call me on 07975 861089. Let's make an appointment and let's do this. Okay? If you are at the point of exasperation, let's say, and you are just so frustrated that you just can't get your words out, or you are just so irritated that nothing makes sense to you, or perhaps if you have those regrets and they're going round and round in your mind and you just can't get past them, if they are blocked within you, then let's sit down and let's talk them through together. You know, sometimes we are carrying emotions that are not ours, and sometimes we are carrying emotions that are unfounded. Sometimes we can be feeling grief, and through that grief, we may decide that, you know, I did that wrong, or I said that wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And so we feel guilt, or we may feel shame over what we can or can't do, or over what we have said or what we have done in the past. What we need to realize is that we are here to have experiences, and that is what those are. If you have hurt somebody's feelings in the past, maybe, just maybe, you gave that person the opportunity to have an experience. That's it. And how they dealt with that experience is down to them. Because, you know, as much as you say sorry, as much as you apologize, you know, at the end of the day, you won't be able to feel the impact that you have on somebody else's life. And if you do apologize, whether you're genuine or not, that then gives the other person another opportunity to have an experience. What does it mean to forgive? How does this impact my life? Does it actually take the pain away? So, yeah, going back, I think I was talking about me. Yeah, you can contact me if you are experiencing grief, if you want to just talk over the blockages that are stopping you from moving forward, those what ifs, those maybes, those if onlys, then yeah, get in contact and let's do this, because it's the only way really that you can meaningfully start to readjust and move forward. So often I say that, you know, within the African Caribbean communities, there is this notion that you shouldn't check your business, keep it to yourself, don't tell anybody what you're doing. And it's been passed down through the generations. And there was a real reason why it was necessary back in the day. It was about survival. It was about staying alive, keeping your information to yourself so that it can't be used against you. And, you know, I've had a conversation with two sisters and then a phone call with another sister recently. And the three of them had all been at the same funeral where they had been told by the family member of the person who had passed away, Don't be chatting my business. Don't tell them about my life. It's got nothing to do with them. Tell them to mind their own business. This is really a notion that has been carried down through the generations. But I think now we are at a time where we have to talk. We have to talk about our experiences. We have to talk about our traumas. We have to talk about those things that are inside us that are stopping us from moving forward. Because these things, when kept inside our bodies, will cause illness. They will shorten our life. Because everything that we experience, if we experience sadness and sorrow and hurt and pain, like grief, these are emotions. These are energies. So if I've got a ball of grief and it's sitting in my lungs, because that's where grief sits, it sits in your lungs, and I've got a square of disappointment sitting in my gut, because that's where that sits, and I have other emotions sitting in my liver, my kidneys, my spleen, in my brain, in my head, in my heart, in my, trauma. If I've got trauma sitting in my teeth, and I say that because it's true, I've had trauma in my teeth that I've had to remove. If you have trauma in certain parts of your body, it's going to cause you dis-ease. You can't be comfortable. And I know that I've said this as well, unaware of the grief that sits in our bodies, unaware of the emotions that we have within us that are festering away because we've not been able to speak about them. When they do arise, we are very likely to trot off to the doctors and get medicated for something that we only needed to talk about. And when we talk, we lengthen our lives now. And when we cry, we heal our pain. And I don't know whether I told you, whether I mentioned it last week, but, I was speaking to a sister once and she said that tears are the strongest form of libation. Tears are healthy. They are necessary. When we cry, we feel so much better because our body releases pain and anxiety within us. In fact, in Tapestries of Grief, I talk about the chemical that is released from us when we cry. It's very healthy, it's a really good thing to do. Sometimes you just need to have a good cry. You just feel better. But these stages of grief that I'm talking about, they're real. They are real, and we have to acknowledge them. You can stick with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief. But as I say, I've created my own. And so, forward, readjust, sorrow, regret, exasperation, anguish, trauma. When we go back to the grief wheel, and I will stress again that you are at the center of your grief, you will find that it's kind of like in a circle. It's kind of made up of triangles that are put in a kind of circular, that's probably the name of a shape. I don't know. I will find out what the shape is. All right, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sides. So maybe that's some kind of, I don't know. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try. But when I was speaking to somebody once, she said that in her culture, if she was doing something like this, putting together a grief wheel, it would open. So it wouldn't be a circle. There would be a way in and there would be a way out. There would be a path that you follow and then you escape from, because it's not going to happen again. That's in the ideal world. oftentimes we have these traumas and we go through these cycles and we don't even realize what we've done. We grieve over so many different things that we experience in our life. And I think I said that at the beginning, you know, sometimes we don't realize that we're alive and our life is like a battle to survive. So sometimes our traumas just keep coming. Sometimes they're worse than others. And sometimes, you know, we don't experience them, but the body does. Sometimes we have a trauma and we get to exasperation and then we're hit with another trauma. We might be experiencing sorrow and we're hit with another trauma. We might get to that point where we can move forward and then we're hit with another trauma. That's life. That's the journey. That's what we've come to Earth to experience. So, you know, like what I was saying about many people dying at the age of 25 and not being buried until they're 75. Well, living is work. Truly living, the experience of being alive is actually work. Now, you can float through life by not being alive. And I think that's what Benjamin Franklin was talking about when he said that they're not buried until they're 75. For some people, they've done all their living by the age of 25 and they can't move further forward. Their minds just can't take in anything other than the get up in the morning, go to work, come home, go to sleep, maybe rave, chat on the phone, go out to dinner, go shopping. But, you know, how often do we really look at the lives that we're living and the experiences that we're having? And I know that I've said it before, but I've worked with families and I've been like, okay, so, you know, what kind of music did your dad like? Oh, oh, well, actually, you know, oftentimes we find that we maybe don't know those people around us as well as we think we do. Sometimes we see the person that we would like to see and not the person that they actually are. Aha. So what I want you to do, a little bit of homework, is I want you to just look at the people in your life. I want you to make a list of who they are. And I want you to just assess your relationship with them. Give them some thought. Yeah. I'm not saying give them some time. I'm not saying sit down with them, talk to them, laugh and joke with them. I'm saying give them some thought. Think about your relationship with them. Who are they? Why do they matter to you? What importance do they bring to your life? How do they nurture you? And in turn, how do you nurture them? What would life be like without them? What would life look like? How would you cope? These are the kind of questions that nobody ever, 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 ever wants to have to think about. But you know what? If we do so in advance, when that time comes, we'll handle it that little bit better. As I've said, you know, you can never be prepared. Your head will do something and your body will do something else. But if you've given it even a shred of thought beforehand, then you've got a head start. All right, okay, let's wrap up this hour. I'm going to play John Legend, Let's Get Lifted, and please join me after the break. Oh, yeah. Okay, so here we are. Second hour on Passion Radio. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. How do you do? I hope you're all right. I hope you're all right. Are you all right? Let me know. Do let me know. I do care. 07975861089. Yeah, all right. Let me know. I don't expect the phone to ring. I don't expect any messages because I'm just talking to myself. And I think as long as I just believe that, then then I won't feel any kind of nerves or anything like that, because it's just me and myself and I on the radio talking about the stuff that really interests me. So first of all, that was Anthony David. I had to play his song to the end because before the break I did play Let's Get Lifted by John Legend, and I don't know how much of that you got. So I'm like, okay, cool, let this ride. Yeah, I've got music for days. I am reggae, I am reggae, roots reggae, I'm bashment, I'm ragga, I'm everything, lovers rock, Studio One, Clashes, I'm reggae, 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 reggae all the way. That's me. But I do have R&B. I do have rare groove. I do have Spandau Ballet and ABBA. I have everything. I have music galore. I've got popcorn. I enjoy all types of music. So in this show, you know, you will hear R&B, you will hear rare groove, but on this show I only play 4 songs. That's the standard because we don't have time to listen to music. Can't always be about music. That's like, you know, the other day I said I'm going to come back and let you know how much of my life music is. Well, I haven't actually officially done maths, but I'm just going to say that's like 45 to 50% of my life. There you go. And the rest I dedicate to dying, death, and grief. So in the first hour, we were talking about the stages of grief. We were talking, oh, okay, I've got a message from Andy, Stone Love. Okay, wasn't expecting anyone to be listening. Now the nerves officially kick in. But no, okay, who's this? Okay. As I was saying, going back to what I was saying. What was I saying? Yes, in the first hour, we were talking about the stages of grief. So I explained about that lady, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and the fact that I made my own. I made my own because that's what we can do. So let's just go over what they are. My stages of grief on the grief wheel that I've created revolve around the trauma, the experience that we've had. You are at the center, you've had an experience, and it may just have knocked you off your feet. You are likely to experience anguish, exasperation, a period of haggling and sorrow and adjustment before you move forward. It's like the standard. When I say the standard, I mean as in like you're going to have experiences in life. This is what life is about. And when you are grieving, you know, when you're grieving, you're going to have different experiences. It's not all going to happen in the same way. It's not all going to be, you know, all at once. It can take quite a while for us to get over our grief. It can take forever. We never stop thinking about the person that we have lost. Life just kind of moves on and we get caught up in living. But in our hearts, we will always long for that person who has gone. Where are they gone? Where are they? I remember when my dad died, it was like, okay, so fine, he's dead. But where is he? What does that mean? What happens next for him? You know, I didn't have those answers. I think if I had those answers at that time, it would have been easier for me to deal with. as I've said in previous shows, you know, I grew up with death. I was very well aware of what death was, but I didn't know what grief was. And I didn't know the effect that grief would have on my life. So it's a transition for everybody. When somebody dies, they have an experience, they have a transition. Dying is a doing word. It's something that you do. The body begins its process of deconstruction once you have left it. When you lay your body aside, your body will deconstruct itself. It is a wonderful thing. These bodies that we sit in, they are intelligence. They are wisdom, they are knowledge, they are computers that we need to get to know. And I'm going off track, but you know, we're often told that, you know, we've got junk DNA, or that we have aspects of us that we will never know. We can know our bodies, we just need to know what we're looking for. There are keys that we need to find, and they unlock parts of our bodies. But that conversation is for another day. Let's talk about that in another show. If you want to talk about it to me before then, if you have notions or feelings or ideas about this, or anything that I talk about that you want to discuss, then please feel free to contact me on 07975 861089. You can also contact me through Dipism. That's my website. That's www.dipism.com. Dipism is spelt DIPISM. DIP stands for Death in Practice. And ism is a way of life. It's a thing. Phenomena, you could say. Or you can contact me at www.facfo.org. FACFO is the Federation of African and Caribbean Funeral Operatives. There, I am looking for everybody who does the work that I do. So join me. If you do this work, join me. If you want to do this work, join me. I can train you up, and I am working with a team of experts within our community who are more than ready to welcome you into the fold and have you help others as they do. Okay? If you are just simply interested in what I'm talking about and you have questions that you would like to explore, then let's explore them together. I'm on a journey, and I'm welcoming you onto that journey with me. Okay, so as I said, sometimes I go off into a little rant. Yeah, so, you know, we've gone through those stages of grief in the grief wheel. And at the center of the grief wheel is you. On the outside of the grief wheel, I have 4 other aspects that I believe that we need to consider. The reason why I can't work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model of grief, stages of grief, is because it was aimed at people who were actively dying. It doesn't consider the people who are grieving for those who have died. So my grief wheel had to be extended to look at the bigger picture. And that, I personally believe, is what is missing from many of the healing modalities around grief, because they don't go that step further. In my opinion, this is what I feel is missing from a lot of the structured organizations within society that are there to help its citizens. Okay, there are some people within society, the greater majority, who also have to deal with other things on top of their grief. Their grief triggers other aspects of their life. We experience secondary losses when somebody we love dies. So let's go into it now. Okay. When somebody that you have loved dies or even just leaves you, you know, this is loss as well. We still grieve. If somebody just gets up and says, you know what, I don't want to be with you anymore, there is grief. Okay. It can happen to us at any time of our lives. And it doesn't matter who we are or who we think we are at that time. We are thrown into like an identity status, kind of disarray kind of thing. Who are we? What matters to us? Who were we when we were with that person? Who will we be now? We learn how to live in relation to the people that are closest to us. And when they die away, we can find ourselves questioning our being and our worth. Am I still a mother? Am I still a husband? Am I still somebody's child? You know, I personally, I'm an orphan. And, you know, when I was growing up, the only orphan I knew was Annie. I didn't know that you could be an orphan as an adult. But, you know, I come across people who are adults who are much older than me and still have their parents around. There are some people who are older than me and still have grandparents around, you know, and these people influence our lives. They influence our thoughts, our behaviors, the experiences that we have, our beliefs, our ideas of what life is and of who we are. So we learn how to be in relation to those people around us. We don't want to upset the apple cart. We want to be liked. We want to be included with those around us. We want to be in the team. We want to be picked, preferably first is always better than the last one to be picked as the, all right, well, we'll have you then. You know, we want to be included. We want to feel as if we are part of something. So when perhaps somebody close to us passes away, we may find ourselves wondering who we are and what our life is going to be like now, moving on. When it comes to status, that could be sort of where you find yourself, you know, your value in the sense of like, you know, I don't know, somebody famous has a status symbols. You know, we have a king now. And I suppose that's his status, that's his title, that's his, you know, that's his thing. You see Charlie Boy and you're like, okay, yeah, his status, yeah. You may have a Rolex watch and feel that that's your status. That makes you somebody, you know? So you may be with somebody who makes you feel like you're with Smaddy. Does that make sense? It's like our status is often based on what we have or the qualities that are desired by others. And sometimes when we lose somebody or we lose something, then our status can dip. Let me give you another example of this. You may have a group of friends that you and your loved one or you and your family were just always part of. You may have been in a religion or part of the local gun club or angling society, you know, and when your loved one passes away, you're kind of left to your own devices. Your status, whatever it was that they brought to the table, is no longer there, or you are no longer who you were without them in other people's eyes. It's a change in status. So you may find now that you kind of drift away into other places and find yourself with different people, different friends. Your ideologies may change. Your learned beliefs, those things that your parents or your teachers told you, or that you learned within your religion, that this is it, this is the way it is, and it's never going to change. This is it, full stop. I remember when I learned the truth about hiccups, I had been told in my science class one thing about hiccups, and then years later, it turned out that actually that wasn't the truth at all. The teacher that was talking about it at the time was the person in authority, and she was so up herself with conviction that what she was saying was true, and nobody could question her. I wouldn't want to question her because, you know, she's telling me about hiccups. Years later, I realized that actually she was wrong. Things do change. And as we grow up, our perspective changes. And so we can find ourselves questioning the teachings that we have always lived by, that we have always obeyed, that we have been good to, you know, maybe they're not real. And you might want to then think, well, where does it come from? It's a bit like that phrase that I said earlier on. Look at her, she don't even know she's alive. Where has that come from? The book was The Great Gatsby. Who's read that? Who's got time? But how many people have that in their dialogue, in their language? Look at her, she don't know she's alive, you know? So yes, sometimes as well, our status can change for the better, which means that our loved one can die and leave us in a better position than we were in. You may find that those groups that you were attached to now embrace you more because your partner's gone. And as I said in the first hour, you know, let's be real about this. Not everybody is a nice person. So when they say never speak ill of the dead, well, I kind of balk against that, because if we never speak about ill of the dead, then we may then go to our own grave with grief that has never been discussed because we couldn't tell the truth about the person who has passed away for fear of upsetting the narrative. What if nobody spoke ill about Jimmy Savile? How many people would not have healed? And the reason why I say that is because it's not just people that were physically touched by Jimmy Savile that suffered. Other people had to talk about grief that they had experienced in their own lives because they had been triggered by the experiences that were revealed when we found out the truth about Jimmy Savile's lifestyle. Okay, so yeah, life is a journey. It's a constant journey of discovery. And as I said in the first hour, we need to talk about this, especially people in the African and Caribbean communities, because of this narrative that we have of not chatting our business. When somebody we love dies, we feel it. We didn't even know. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, and I believe that there may not have been many people in the UK who knew George Floyd personally, but we felt his loss. When he died, we witnessed something miraculous. For many of us, this was a very traumatic experience. We have to talk. Otherwise, we internalize our pain and it leads to sickness. And before we know it, we're trotting off to the doctors and we're given medication that will leave us with side effects that will do us even more damage than the original pain that we went there to go and heal. I feel as if I'm repeating myself time and time again, but you know, these are conversations that we need to have, and I will continue to speak until I don't need to say anything else. Okay, let's move on. So, family dynamics can change when somebody that we love passes away. Now, we're always changing, we're always growing, we're always discovering more about ourselves. And the best place to do that is within a secure family unit. Standard, but not all of us have the luxury of having a secure family unit. And even those of us that do can find that this dynamic is rocked to the core when somebody that we love passes away. The family can be altered to a point where communications become strained and misunderstandings mount up to the point where resentment and ill will manifest. Oftentimes, I've heard people say, you know, he's my brother and I grew up with him, but I don't recognize the new him since mum died. I've heard that. People change, grief changes people. Sometimes their fear makes them very insecure and very nervous and very worried about their own future. And so they decide that they're going to grab everything for themselves. And as I've said, not everybody is a nice person. Some people are just selfish, and that really comes to the fore when there's an opportunity to grab hold of the booty or the loot. You know, when there's a chance to take the money, to get the inheritance, winner takes all. And, you know, because we grow up with these people, our family members, we know strengths and weaknesses. You know, we often know who's going to react how and when, and what's going to trigger those that are closest to us. And as I've said, on the flip side, not everybody is nice, you know, so sometimes relationships can get better, and sometimes we can feel as if we can finally breathe within the family dynamic. Let's be truthful, let's be honest, let's talk about this. Sometimes if a family member has been suffering for so long, and we have watched them suffer in pain for so long, it can be a relief when they pass away. It can be a celebration because they have done all that they can. And now they are elevated to a new existence, a new state. Personally, you know, I can't subscribe to this notion of death that we have been given, because at the end of the day, number one, nobody knows the truth. But number two, I personally have had too many conversations with people who are dead to believe that dead is dead. It's simply not the case, in my opinion. So, you know, when somebody that we love dies, we really do have to be aware of the family dynamics. I said in the first hour, you know, that a dad or a mum can have 6 or 7, 1 or 2, 8 or 9 children. Then you've got cousins. Then you've got aunts and uncles. Then you've got friends of the family as well. What my friend Queenie refers to as country family, country cousins. Those who were, you know, friends of the family. They're so close friends that they are family. Everybody has a different relationship with the person who has died. And because, as I explained in the first hour, due to shock, our bodies might behave differently to our minds, we can kind of do some lunatic, stupid things when we actually stop and look back at it. And sometimes we might find that we are wrong and strong. We don't want to back down. We want to be heard. And sometimes our kinfolk is not our skin folk. So just because somebody looks like you, just because perhaps they were raised in the same family or the same community as you, they are skin folk, yes, but they're not necessarily your kinfolk. And when somebody that you love passes away, that's when you figure out who's who, because you can't hide. You can't hide. You can't lie. Nobody can keep it up for a long time. It's impossible. So we may find then that we need a change of environment. You may feel like you've outgrown your environment, or that it holds no more meaning for you now. You may find that your memories are just too much, and that you need some space away to be able to just get your thoughts together. Okay? Sometimes you just look and all around you is your loved one. Sometimes that just brings so much pain and hurt. You can, excuse me, as a, what's the word I'm looking for? As a knee-jerk reaction, one day just go and throw everything of theirs away. That will come back and bite you. Yeah, it's not always necessarily the right thing to do. You need to take time with yourself. But yeah, sometimes that means that you might just have to take away yourself and have an experience somewhere else. Even though you do that, even if you move to a different country or you move to a different place within the same country, you will take them with you. You take your loved ones with you. You take your memories with you. You take your traumas with you. You take your life with you. That's what you can't escape. And that's the work that needs to be done. Healing on a deep level is necessary. Sometimes seeing fresh faces, new scenery, and, you know, clean water, clean air can really help. And I speak from experience because I moved from London to Yorkshire, and now I feel as if I am alive. I feel as though I am living. Huddersfield saved my life. Being in the hustle and bustle was killing me, and I didn't realize it. I couldn't breathe. I needed to be free. And I found that in Yorkshire. You know, I still brought myself with me, my loved ones with me. You know, we came and we grow. And for some people, that experience can be detrimental. You know, when I moved, here we go, we're getting personal. When I moved, I did it because I was in need. I didn't really consider my children. Oh, they're young enough, they'll get over it. But it really did have a detrimental effect that they now hanker for the UK, they hanker for England, they hanker for London, sorry. They hanker to go back home because they weren't ready to leave. So we really do need to think about what we're doing. We can't just get up and run because it runs with us wherever we go. But, you know, sometimes as well, we might leave a place to be with the person that we love. And sometimes we might just need to go home or find a new home. Sometimes that home is within you, you know? Such is life. All right, so we're moving on to the last dynamic now, which is finances. When somebody that we love passes away, you know, whether the loss was sudden or unexpected, you may find yourself with debt that are spiraling out of control. Bills that you've not been able to deal with because your mind has been preoccupied. You may now experience the loss of a second income. That can be really detrimental. It can have a really detrimental effect on your life, on the life of your family members. The family continues to grow. Children still need food and clothes. They still need shoes on their feet. You know, there may be trips to school events, or there may be uniform that needs to be brought. You may need to now get yourself a second income. You may find that you can't keep up and you can't maintain the lifestyle that you had before. So again, you may need to move house. You may need to downsize. You know, all of this stuff impacts upon our grief. It has a direct impact. If you have a loved one who dies very suddenly, then you weren't necessarily planning for that death. The problem is that very few of us, and I'll give you the stats next week, very few of us write a will. Very few. And on the top of my head, I don't know, for some reason, the stat of one in 5, but it may be 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 50 has actually written a will so that our finances are in order, our next of kin is looked after. You know, do we consider the fact that, you know, we've got these children, 2, 3, 1, 8, and we could pass away? What will happen to those children? They may have godparents, but their godparents might not be in a position to raise your children. You know, maybe nobody in your family is in a position where they can actually look after your children, and they may end up in care in the system. So we really have to think about our lives. These are the kind of conversations that we need to be considering. Also, I suppose, you know, when you're courting, yes, I am very old fashioned that way. When you're courting, when you're with your partner, when you're planning your lives, we need to be thinking about, well, what would happen if you pass away? Who will take these children? Because as I've said, you know, christening them doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be cared for. And, you know, we do christen and fall out with people. It happens, you know, and sometimes the people that we would like to look after the children are not actually the best person for the job. So we need to think about that. Finances, you know, funerals are not cheap. Funerals can be really costly. And we can have that added burden of, well, I'm going to have to cater for everybody. And obviously there's the traditions and the rituals. There may be 9 nights or other rituals or traditions that need to be observed in the family. These may incur extra expenses. We really do have to be thinking about all this stuff, you know. So many people will come to your funeral because they just want to eat your food and drink your drink. There are people who are serial funeral attenders, and they don't even have to have known you when you were alive. They just know that there's going to be a hot meal at that place, that community centre, or that location at such a time. All they have to do, perhaps, is wear black. You know, I laugh, but it's so real. It's so real. We may not have the money to bury our loved ones. Even celebrities are having GoFundMe. When I say celebrities, I mean kind of people in our community who maybe once was on the television. Yeah. Are doing GoFundMes. Their families have to, because no matter what life they lived, what expenses they managed to burn through, they didn't consider the end game. So before you know it, it's a GoFundMe jobby. And I'm not putting it down. It is what it is. But we need to be thinking ahead. Have you written a will? You may not feel you have anything to leave. My dad always used to say, you know, when I die, just bury me in the garden. He didn't consider the fact that maybe upon his death, 2 days after his funeral, his new wife would change the locks so that I can't gain entrance into the house that I grew up in. He never thought about that, did he? No. Such is life, is what he would say. And what I did was I went about my business. Why? Because my dad always used to say, leave people and then things. That was hers now. You know, it took me a little while to get over it, how somebody can switch. And then I realized, you know what? Everybody has their own traumas. Everybody has their own experiences. So maybe she deserved that house. Maybe she deserved it. Who knows? Who am I to say? We just need to know about our money. We need to be about that life. We need to know that those that we love and care about are protected once we're gone. So, shameless plug, my book, My Life's Tapestry, allows us the time to actually sit and think about the lives that we have lived, the experiences that we've had, the family tree, you know, the rituals and traditions that matter, the possessions that we want to leave to who and where, and what can go to charity. Who's going to actually look after these kids, and who's going to look after Snuffles? Because, yeah, more and more of us people, Black people, people from the community, are walking street with dogs. More and more of us have hamsters and gerbils and them things there. Yeah. Who's going to look after your animals when you've gone? Who's going to look after your feral kids when you've gone? You know, we need to be thinking about stuff like this. Who's going to pay for your funeral? And what do you actually want for your funeral? What are your desires? What is your request? You know, what funeral director would you rather we use? Can we use the co-op? Is that okay? Or would you rather use another funeral director? You know, when you're walking down the high street, there are so many shops that we don't see. We don't see the funeral directors until we actually need one. Just think about it. You know, I'm not saying that you need to think about it every day for the rest of your life. I'm just saying consider it now so that you can live the rest of your life without being in fear of what might happen. Yeah? Simple things. Really is simple things. And as I say, I'm just here. I'm talking to myself, and now I'm talking to Andy because he's messaged me to let me know that he is here and he loves Stone. He loves Stone Love. So there's two of us that are having this conversation. And if anybody happens to happen upon this conversation, then thank you for joining us. I really hope that what I have said this morning, this afternoon, this evening spurs you on to really start thinking about your life and the experiences that you're having and your way forward. Okay, so we're coming to the last 10 minutes of the show. And as I said, in the first hour, I played John Legend, Let's Get Lifted, and I don't know how much of it you heard. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I leave about, I don't know, 5 minutes for our final song, which means then that I've got about 6 more minutes to just talk about myself. Maybe a bit more than that. What we need to understand, what we need to remember is that you don't have to suffer a bereavement before becoming aware of your grief. One of the best things that you can do for yourself is take time out to consider your own mortality. So when I finished the first hour, I was asking you to consider the lives of those that are around you, the lives of those that you love, those that are closest to you. Now I want you to consider your life, yourself, who you are, what you bring to the table, what matters to you. I want you to realize how important you are. You are so important. You are perfect. And I think I might be one of the only people who actually says that. You are perfect just as you are, because nobody else can live your life. You're doing it your way, and you are the expert of your life. Nobody can, you know, walk in your shoes the way that you do. So you need to consider what it is that you take with you when you pass away. Because that is what people are going to cry over. That is what people are going to miss. That is what people are going to mourn. Yeah? That relationship that you have with others. You are unique. You are so special. You are so important. You are fundamental. You are a necessity. You are a vital piece of the fabric that creates the tapestry, that creates communities, that creates families, that creates friendships. Yeah, we all move together as a fabric because you exist. And when we take you out of the picture, there's adjustment, there's dis-ease, there's discomfort, until we have to readjust and find another way to wear this fabric, to weather it, you know? And the fabric exists because you existed. Even if you decide to cut your life short, you're still part of a fabric, you know? And you only lay your body aside. Okay, all right, okay, let's get into this very quickly, very briefly. Even if you decide to lay your body aside, that's all you do, because you're sitting inside this body. If you believe in reincarnation, then you will have to come back and do it all over again. And what you learned from previous lifetimes is brought with you. It's a journey. It's the journey of the soul. It's the way it is. There is so much more to death than we realize, than we understand, than we recognize. But death is such a beautiful thing. It's a transition, and it is to be celebrated. So going back to what I was saying about reincarnation, not everybody believes in it. Some people will rebuke the thought of reincarnation. I was raised to believe that there was no such thing as reincarnation. When you're dead, you're dead. And that's it, you're over. You go to sleep and that's it. I was taught that you will then be resurrected and live on a paradise earth. That thought, I rejected that because I didn't want to live with people I didn't like. But I recently had a conversation with one of the brothers in our community called Paul Obina, and he mentioned reincarnation. And he said that the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, aka the last Caesar, he had a wife called Empress Theodora. And she was the one who decided that we should stop talking about reincarnation. It was she who didn't like the teaching of reincarnation. And that is why we reject it so willingly today. Empress Theodora, the wife of the last Caesar, Byzantine Emperor Justinian, in AD 553. Check that out. So that was information that was given to me recently by brother Paul Obina, who is doing fantastic work in the community. And he also talks about rites of passage, which is something that I'm really interested in. Rites of passage, because there are times in our lives when we experience transitions from childhood into the teen ages, from the teenagers into the young adult, from the young adult into the adult, and then the mature adult, and the young elder, and then the mature elder, and then the great transition of death, when we lay our bodies aside. Gosh, it's a bit like going to work, isn't it? We get up in the morning, we go to work, we do our thing, we come home, we go to sleep, we wake up again. That's it, you know? Our life is a cycle. Our days are cycles, 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 and we continue to rise up, rise up. And that's all that it is. That's all it is. There is really no need for us to be living in fear because we are on this cycle. We die every night. We wake up every morning. And we do it again and again and again. Such is life. Okay, all right. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. You can join me at later on this evening, 8 till 10. I will be playing ska. Oh, yeah, I have got 2 hours of the best ska for you. And that is because this weekend I was listening to a DJ. His name is Maurice, One Nation Under a Groove. And he was dedicating his show. He actually ran overtime. He was dedicating his show to his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Cunningham, who both passed away in the same month, the same year, and they were both buried together that same month as well, that being April. So he did a beautiful tribute to them. And I'm going to be continuing that tribute, my version of it, tonight on my show, 8 till 10 on Passion Radio. Thank you so much for joining me today. Here we have Angie Stone, No More Rain.